Welcome to Detroit Lions News. I'm your host Joe Chap, and we are doing our season preview. So a lot of people are new to the podcast. We obviously had to do our season preview and get it out for you guys, especially since next week is a game, and it comes at Thursday. So we play on a Thursday instead of a Sunday. So that kind of screws up the momentum of things. So we have a lot to get to in today's episode. Tyler, you got anything to say right now?
It's finally here. It's finally time. We are getting close to the start of the season. We have the first week is probably the hardest team that we have to play all year, arguably. It's going to be a really big testament to what we're made of. My first initial reaction is don't get too upset if we do lose. They are the reigning Super Bowl champs, but I'm looking for a competitive game. I want to keep the score close. And I would love a win. I think that would say a lot about this team. But if we lose a tight one, I'm not losing hope. I mean, they are the Super Bowl reigning champs right now.
Yeah. Well, listen, they got to go in there. They got to compete. Obviously, that's number one and number two. But number three is you want them to win the game. So we got to get to what we're going to get to with the whole season preview. Obviously, we have the news about Emmanuel Moseley. He's not going to start off on the PUP list. They did sign Craig Reynolds back to the active roster today. Julian Okwara, he went to the IR. That was kind of strange to me. There was a lot of practice squad sent in, which is a kid from Dallas today. That's pretty interesting. But there's a lot of things that are interesting with this Detroit Lions team. I didn't get your opinion, Tyler, on the 53-man roster. Was there something on the 53-man roster that really you were shocked by, kind of like, what are they doing, kind of thing?
Yes. Us getting rid of Starling Thomas and keeping Khalil Dorsey. I think we have enough special teams guys. I think we have enough return men. I think we have enough guys that provide the same level, if not better, value than Khalil Dorsey. And losing out on a guy like Starling Thomas, who I thought had an awesome preseason, someone that we could really develop as replacing Will Harris in that kind of fourth CB role, was a little surprising, and it came back to bite us because he was picked up by Arizona.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yep. So I don't know. That was the only real surprise, was that Khalil Dorsey from left field. I mean, I didn't see him making the roster. Another sort of surprise, we went a little bit light on wide receiver. But that must mean that something bigger is coming.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I don't think that nothing big is coming. I'm kind of suggestive to think that they're going to go out and get a wide receiver. We heard that they were interested in kickers. I don't know what they're going to do with kickers. I would have liked Will Lutz, the kicker from New Orleans, but he went to Denver, and then Denver got rid of Brett Maher. So, look, if you're not too heavy on the kicker that you like, so the one thing that Brett Holmes has not done well as a general manager of the Detroit Lions is go and get a kicker. Like, that's one of the things I look at with Brett Holmes, and I go, man, this could come back to haunt you more than one way.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have have like your guy, right? Like, so like every GM or every different franchises kind of seem to be like they find a kicker or special teams guys that they really like, and it's kind of like they can stick with them long term. I mean, we had Jason Hanson for the longest time, and then we got Matt Prater off of some circumstances resulting his alcoholism. We were able to scoop him for next to nothing, and it's just like it's been a struggle to find someone since, and like we go back and forth with Badgley and Riley Patterson and these random XFL guys and Kickalicious and John Parker Romo and these different guys, and it's just like it's one of those luxuries where you don't realize how big of a luxury it is until you don't have a good kicker. Like, you take good kickers for granted.
Yeah, you're right about that. That's one of the things I worry about with the kicker, because we obviously have had kickers with Detroit for the longest of times, but I just don't get it. Tyler, let me get your opinion. I don't know why it took me off the camera. Let me get your opinion on something. Let me get your opinion on something. So last podcast we were talking about how the wide receiver depth was a little bit shaky, right?
Yep.
When you seen Antoine Green make that long strides and that breakaway speed against Carolina, what was your first initial thoughts? And do you think that we have enough at wide receiver to kind of survive an injury if they get an injury?
Yeah, so I've been calling this out since the draft that Antoine Green would make the roster. When he had that long 60-yard touchdown, my first initial words out of my mouth were "Welcome to the 53-man roster." Like I knew he was on like sort of on the bubble, but having a big play like that for a touchdown and showing up the last two preseason games made him, I don't want to say a lock, but a very, very, very likely candidate to make our thin wide receiver room. So my first initial thoughts was, okay, great. That's his defining moment and why he's going to make the final roster. Because even in the first couple weeks, you could have argued instead of Antoine Green, maybe, Dylan Drummond, Coda, stuff like that. But when you see a guy like take over a play like that and just have that breakaway speed and good hands, I mean, it reminds you why you drafted him in the first place. And he has familiarity with Dre Bly, and he comes from working with Drake May and a good offensive system at UNC. So I like it. I think that he can be a very serviceable wide receiver 4, and I think our room is thin, but we have like enough guys that are serviceable. I think we still need to go get one more like decent named veteran because I don't know. I just don't know if outside of Amon Ra, if Marvin Jones, Josh Reynolds, and Khalif Raymond like do it enough for me to move the needle. I mean, it's just kind of like,
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, outside of Amon Ra, I mean, you're talking about, a near bottom supporting cast of as far as wide receiver rooms go. I mean, in the league.
Yeah.
It's just,
It's so tough because obviously, like you have an opinion on these guys, and you're hoping that you don't have the injuries that you think that you could have, but you're gonna have those injuries. So
it's just tough because I feel like we have a lot of like wide receiver. Like we have our wide receiver room is full of like wide receiver 3 and 4s. Like we have like 4 wide receiver 4s. We have one true number 1, and we have a potential number 2 in JMO, but he's not available for the first 6 weeks. But other than that, we have like 4 wide receiver 4s, and it's like, man,
yeah, you get to that point in the year, maybe week 10, maybe week 11, and you're struggling for to get a guy healthy enough to put on the roster. Now, we have a lot to get to, obviously. Let's get to it. One of the things I want to get to is when we look at this Detroit Lions team in totality, like if we look on the offensive side of the ball, like we look at DeAndre Swift leaving, Jamal Williams leaving. They add David Montgomery. They add Jahmyr Gibbs. They add Sam Laporta. Do you think the offense got better or worse in the offseason?
And now if you were to just say free agent acquisitions and free agent losses, pretty even. But if you count the draft as well, I mean, I'd say we got a lot better overall this offseason. Because I think Montgomery is an upgraded version of Jamal Williams, and I think Jahmyr Gibbs is like the upper echelon of what we thought or would hope that DeAndre Swift would be. We've seen Swift be super explosive. We've seen him be fast. We've seen him be a playmaker. We've seen him be very special, but he can't stay on the field and he can't do it long enough to make a deep impact on a team. So I'd say we definitely got better. You hope that, and I hear good things from Chicago fans about David Montgomery and his leadership and his poise, but you just hope that he can be at least half of what Jamal Williams was as a leader for that locker room, because there are some things that are intangible. But let's be honest with ourselves, man. I mean, yeah, it was cool to see Jamal get those touchdowns, but the dude was like a 1-yard merchant. Like 9 of his 17 touchdowns were from the 1-yard line, and like 12 of the 17 were within 3. I mean, he's just a goal line guy. He'll stuff it in for you, and he's a great guy, and I wish him the best. But I definitely think we got better. I think I see David Montgomery as a potential, 1,100, 1,200 yard guy. with double-digit touchdowns, and I also see Jahmyr Gibbs as an 800 or 900 yard rushing guy with 60, 70 catches for another
Right.
600 or 700 yards. And I mean, he's going to be your all-purpose Marshall Faulk can catch, can rush guy. I think we have an awesome 1-2 punch. The receiver room didn't get any better, but I also wasn't super upset about losing Chark because I feel like he only played in like 6 games anyways.
Right. Now,
So,
if we look in totality, did the Lions get better on offense with the additions of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery? I'd say yes. Then you add in the added depth of Graham Glasgow.
yeah, and then you pretty much swap Hawkinson with Laporta, which Hawkinson just became the highest paid tight end in the league.
Yeah,
4 year. So we got Laporta. We basically got a better yards after catch yak version of Hawkinson, but for like 1/10 of the price. Like
Sam Laporta to me reminds me a little bit of he reminds me more of George Kittle than TJ Hawkinson ever would because of his rack yardage. I mean, when TJ Hawkinson was going through Iowa, he had Nate Stanley as his quarterback, which he was a pretty damn good quarterback. Wasn't a pro quarterback, but he was good enough. Sam Laporta had I can't even, I'm forgetting his name. Spencer Petras, the Iowa quarterback. And he was absolutely brutal. So, I mean, he was one of the worst quarterbacks in Iowa history, which says a lot because there's been a lot of bad quarterbacks at Iowa. But it was one of the worst scoring teams in the nation. They had the best defense in the nation. They couldn't score in a whorehouse. So it was like consistently like it was either Sam Laporta gets yardage, Sam Laporta gets a touchdown, or they weren't scoring. I mean, the Iowa defense outscored the Iowa offense. That tells you how bad that Iowa offense was.
that's insane.
So if we look at the totality, did the Detroit Lions get better with their offensive acquisitions and their losses? I think they got better in the run game with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. I think they got better depth because if you trade out Evan Brown for Graham Glasgow, that's kind of a better get. Maybe DJ Chark, maybe Marvin Jones, like maybe you say, but then you look at the other side, like you look at Marvin Jones and you say this guy cannot stay healthy to save his life. So maybe you get a Marvin Jones and he could stay healthy. That's pretty much the deciding factor of the DJ Chark or Marvin Jones. Yeah. So I think they got better on the offensive side of the ball. Now the defensive side of the ball is interesting because I don't know if you've seen my video. If I don't know if people saw my video, I posted it on my page. For some reason, I'm not getting the clicks that I usually get. But I did a video about the secondary, right? And I'm showing you this right now. So the player movement in the offseason, the free agency, you got CJ Gardner-Johnson, Emmanuel Mosley, Cameron Sutton signed in free agency. Then you drafted Brian Branch. You obviously let go of guys like you let go of Amani Awari, okay? You let go of Deshaun Elliott. You let go of Mike Hughes. You let go of Jeff Okudah. Did they get better on defensive side of the ball? If you just look at this alone, you're like, yeah, they did. But I'm going to even go a little bit step further, Tyler, because I'm going to show you this. The best yak yardage allowed. So these were the 4 best against the yards after catch. So Kirby Joseph was number 1. This surprises me. Amani Awari was 108, but if he would have played more games, he would have been up there too. And then Jerry Jacobs was number 3. Deshaun Elliott was number 2. He was the last one. They should have switched positions, but they didn't. And then when you look at completion percentage against, so this is how many times. Look at Deshaun Elliott's number. 81.
I didn't realize he was so poor in coverage. That's awful.
31 for 38. So every time you threw at Deshaun Elliott, there was a 81% chance that you were going to complete the ball. Mike Hughes was dreadful. Will Harris, 70%. That's not good either. I mean, Anzalone was up there, Awari, but then you look at the bottom 3. I mean, Jeff Okudah kind of surprised me at 59.7. Jerry Jacobs at 53.2. Then you add into the play, like the value added of these players. You get Cameron Sutton. He had 3 interceptions last year, completion percentage of 47.9%, and a yak yardage allowed of 118, which would be one of your best on the league and your best on the team. You have CJ Gardner-Johnson, 6 interceptions, completion percentage of 73.1, yak yardage allowed 123. Now, the thing about his completion percentage, if you look at the completion percentage of CJ Gardner-Johnson, he likes to go. He likes to risk it for the biscuit. So he's gonna try to get interceptions. He's gonna try to make some plays with it, and it sometimes costs him in the end. And then you got Emmanuel Mosley. This was 2 years ago because he didn't play a full year last year, and you look at that completion percentage against like
That,
56.4.
that says a lot about Cameron Sutton, man. That guy. I mean, we got a steal for that guy. That dude is a dog.
It's crazy because I mean you look at it like if Emmanuel Mosley is healthy, if Cameron Sutton's healthy, you're literally getting two great players that could help you win right then and there.
I mean,
So
Cameron Sutton's numbers, those were like fringe elite numbers. I mean, you got 47% completion percentage, which I'd be curious to see how that stacks up against like some of the top corners in the league. I'd have to imagine it's pretty close.
it's pretty close, but you know what the funny thing about it is like when I looked at this and I looked at like corners across the league, right? So Jalen Ramsey was one I looked at, and his completion percentage against was 53.4%.
Yeah.
So even Cameron Sutton was coming underneath him. And then you add in this. This is what you add in, Tyler. The worst yak allowed on the team. Look at this. Jeff Okuda, 270 yards. Mike Hughes, 197. You had Alex Anzalone, Will Harris, and Malcolm Rodriguez, but they're in a different position than those two.
Yeah, and I see and the Malcolm Rodriguez one actually that one doesn't surprise me a ton because being the type of linebacker that he is and his specific skill set, I think that he was asked to do a lot of the things that he shouldn't have been asked to do last year. And I think the addition of Jack Campbell and the emergence of the reemergence of Derek Barnes should make should make Malcolm Rodriguez able to truly do what he's good at. And I think he will carve himself into a very nice specialist role in this team for years to come. I do think because of Hard Knocks and just because, girls think he's cute, cowboy or whatever, that sometimes he does get a little bit of inflated love.
Yep.
He may be a little slightly overrated by the fan base, but he's still a very good player. And I think by letting him do what he's good at and not asking too much of him is going to help him shine even more and fit a very specific role.
Yeah, I feel like with Kelvin Shepard said that you have potentially 4 starting linebackers, right? You have Derek Barnes, you have Jack Campbell, and Jack Campbell, if anything from the preseason shows you that he could be an elite playmaker.
I think he's going to be green dot too, man.
If he gets the green dot, but you hear Derek Barnes is doing good. Like if you have 4 linebackers that you could switch in and you could put in certain situations and make them, help them. Like a lot of people were mad about Will Harris being on the roster. I know you don't like Will Harris either. We've gone back,
but the veteran presence and the experience that it does have, and in the depth of those positions. I mean, I understand where they're coming from, and it does make sense. I mean, I would rather have a 5th-year guy who somewhat knows what the hell is going on versus like an undrafted free agent who's never played a game. I get it. I do get it, and that's probably where you're going with that.
Well, when I look at it with Will Harris is like, look, he doesn't do anything spectacular, and if you go back to the stats, I mean, he was one of the worst statistical guys on the team. I mean, you go worst yak, he was right there. You go to completion percentage against, he was top 3. There's nothing that he does that is some kind of magnificent. He's not great at anything, but if as a depth player, he could help you. I know a lot of people were like, yeah, what about Starling Thomas? What about Starling Thomas? What about Starling Thomas? It's kind of the thing of, Dan Campbell probably trusts Will Harris on special teams, Like, I know special teams is very important to this coaching staff. And if you can't make it on special teams, you probably won't make it on the roster altogether. And one of the reasons I think Khalil Dorsey got on the roster, if you're going to be honest with yourself, he was great on special teams.
Yeah.
Really great.
Yeah, and I see the Den just commented about don't forget Stephen Gilmore. I mean, I think he had a really good preseason. I also, another preseason camp darling. Don't be shocked if you don't see much of him, but he has good pedigree. He has good genes. His brother is a former defensive player of the year, and I liked what I saw from Gilmore. But it's things like that where you get some of those guys at your 5th or 6th corner spot.
Yeah.
That you are kind of lucky to be able to have the flexibility to be able to explore some of that depth. But again, some of these guys you can't fall in love with too much. I think Stephen Gilmore could be a nice depth piece if needed, but don't look for your next diamond in the rough all pro CB1 to come out of an undrafted free agents class. I mean,
Well, I just look at what Brett Holmes has done with these undrafted free agents.
no, it's
I
great.
mean,
We've added
the
one.
first,
We've added
the,
one to every 53 man since he's been here.
yeah, the first year you had Jerry Jacobs and AJ Parker. Granted, that was a really bad roster.
Yeah.
Last year it was, who was it last year? I don't know. And then this year you had Stephen Gilmore. I mean, like he's done a great job at the undrafted free agent market, getting the guys that he's got. So that's something that Brett Holmes does really, really well, especially after the draft, because we all know that the draft doesn't start or end at the undrafted free agents, because we all know who Arian Foster is. He was once an undrafted free agent. So if you could find steals like Jerry Jacobs as an undrafted free agent, you're gonna be all right.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm trying to think of, did Derek Deese make the roster last year?
Yeah, you went dark for a minute, dude.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the unique part about having a team that's on the come up or a team that's been historically bad, is that like a lot of these guys don't make a lot of normal NFL rosters, but sometimes that's for a good reason, a good thing for us too. Like we get to see guys like actually become something of themselves. Like Jerry Jacobs, I mean, he's not like he's some like top 10 all pro corner, but if you look at his advanced metrics and his like next level, next gen stats, he's like statistically a pretty like serviceable corner. I mean, he's good.
I mean, if you look at this stat right here, completion percentage against,
Yeah,
Jerry
no,
Jacobs is the best on that team.
For an undrafted guy, I mean, like him and Cameron Sutton are two of like, I think they both made the top 15 in statistical like man coverage corners in the league, which is crazy because Jerry Jacobs, you don't think of a guy as like an elite like man coverage guy, but he's made a very good name for himself. But again, would we have seen that if we were a team that was constantly competing, that we have good players in those positions already? So we're like in a unique spot where we can allow to see the talent of these guys that wouldn't get noticed from good teams.
Yeah, I just think that Brett Holmes has done a pretty good job at getting this roster to its full level. Obviously, when you talk about Brad Holmes, you talk about this defense, you talk about the value that they've added. So I'll rephrase it like this. When you look at this defense, did they get better or did they get worse? I don't think that there's anyone that's saying they got worse.
They didn't lose anybody. I mean, like we lost Jeff Okuda and Mike Hughes. Like, oh, okay, wow, how shit.
Well, you lost Jeff Okuda, you lost Mike Hughes, you lost Deshaun Elliott.
Yeah, I mean,
and
but those guys are like
you didn't lose anything.
Those are like might be our 4 worst defensive players. Like, I mean, statistically, I mean, the only one who's like that's on that, or who's one like only person that's not there is Will Harris.
Yeah.
If you add Will Harris to that list, you're talking about that's probably our 5 worst guys on defense.
But look at the value you added though.
Absolutely. Like you had a top 10 safety. You had 2 top 15 corners, and you add a guy in Brian Branch who's absolutely got the freaking juice, man.
That's all you can ask for. I mean, I look at this team and I go, this could be a really, really special season. It starts with Kansas City, but like, so what I was asking you before the whole podcast, and you thought that we were going to do it on the podcast, but I wanted to give people a graphic to show what you guys are thinking. So if we go to the graphic of like, who do we fear in the NFC North? Okay, like I think we all fear one team, but it was interesting because when I made this graphic, I was like, okay, they both Mayock and Tyler think the same way, and I must be the odd man out. So if you're in the comment section, if you're watching this live right now, tell me who you fear in the division. So here's who we got. So who do you fear most? I had Green Bay. I had Minnesota at 2. I had Chicago at 3. Tyler and Mayock. I don't know what they did. I think they're sabotaging this whole segment. But you had Tyler and Mayock. 1 was the Vikings, 2 was the Bears, and 3 was the Packers. Now I ask you, Tyler, why the hell do you fear the Bears over the Packers?
So I don't really fear any of these teams. And Michael Espinoza here in the comments said nobody, which is kind of funny because I do think we have a clear shot at winning this North this year. I do think the Vikings first makes a lot of sense to me in the fact that Minnesota is still a top level team on many positions. They added a really good rookie receiver. They have probably the best receiver in the league. If not, he's top two. And they have the only thing that concerns me, their defense isn't the greatest. They're getting older on defense. Their offensive line is sort of shaky. And then you replaced a perennial all-star Pro Bowl running back in Dalvin Cook with his backup, Alexander Madison.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not terribly terrified, but they are a team that could mess around and win double-digit games easy. I mean, last year they went on a tear and they ended up winning a decent amount of games. The reason I put the Bears over the Packers, and honestly, it was very, very close to me. I'm not really scared of either of them, to be honest. But the reason is just the uncertainty of Jordan Love, and I feel like giving Justin Fields some weapons, I feel like they are going to exceed expectations. They spent money this year. Whether they don't really have the depth that other teams do, or they're still early in the rebuild, I'm still not really worried about them. But adding DJ Moore, adding another year of experience to Justin Fields, Khalil Herbert emerged last year. They spent money on defense. It's just I don't think the Packers have put themselves in a position. They lost a lot of their team this year to the Jets or just to the free agency pool. And they have a quarterback who is I don't know if he's ever started a game in his career. When I'm talking about who could be better, I'm talking about Packers ceiling is 7 wins. The Bears ceiling might be 7 or 8. I'm not it's splitting hairs. So it could have been flip-flopped either way for me, really.
Well, the only reason I put the Packers at number 1 is a team that I fear. I mean, I don't really fear any of them in the division, if we're going to be totally honest with me. If I'm going to be totally honest with you. But when I look at the division, I look at Chicago, right? If we look at this graphic again, I look at Chicago and I go, what the hell did they do to help Justin Fields? Yes, they got DJ Moore. Yes, they did. They got some guys to help him out and on the receiver end and all that stuff. But you still got to block. You still got to block. I don't care how good of I don't care how good of a runner, how mobile Justin Fields is. If he's getting hit on 38% of his dropbacks again, you're not going to have a shot to really compete in this division.
And the only reason I say that though is because how ironic have so many years we've doubted the Bears and they've somehow, some way found a way to win 9 or 10 games. I feel like it's happened before.
I don't feel like this is the season. I feel like look,
a few years ago with Mitch Trubisky, they won 11 or 12 games, and
I put the Bears and the Vikings in the same category. I really do, because I look at the Vikings and I go, that defense is so old. You might as well put that in a nursing home. It is a nursing home defense. I look at the Chicago Bears, that offensive line is pretty ratchet. They're pretty bad. They're not good. Fields was hit on 38% of his dropbacks last year, and he was sacked on a really good percentage of them. So that's why I don't fear the Bears or the Vikings. I fear the Packers the most because, look, Aaron Rodgers is out of here, right? Jordan Love, I think people are dismissing how good of a quarterback he could potentially be. But I really want
in the league for 1 year.
I really want you to look at their roster. You got Aaron Jones, you got AJ Dillon, you got Christian Watson. Then you look on the defensive side of the ball, they got Jari Alexander, they got Rashawn Gary. They got some players on that defense that's really, really good.
Devondre Campbell, Eric Stokes.
Devondre Campbell, Quay Walker when he's not pushing trainers. I mean, I fear Green Bay more because of the roster. I look at Minnesota and Chicago the same. I feel like Chicago, they can't block for Justin Fields. So what are you going to get out there? And with Minnesota, look at that defense. You tell me who they're stopping.
The only thing that's tough is dude, not only do the Packers have a quarterback who's never played, but they also have their top 3 guys were 2 of them were rookies last year. One was a 5th round pick. One was a 2nd round pick. And then the other one is a 2nd round pick from Michigan State. So you got Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, and Romeo Doubs as your top 3. That might be that's definitely a bottom 5 receiver core in the NFL. And you have a guy that hasn't played any games. So it's either it's going to go really well and they're going to turn on the Jets and show why that like they have that chip on their shoulder, or they're gonna totally shit the bed and win 4 games.
Who's that? The Bears?
No, the Packers. Their
See,
offense is so inexperienced. I mean, they got,
the-
like I said, you got Reed, Watson, and Dobbs.
I feel like the Packers are better suited to help to kind of go against the Lions because they can run the ball. They don't have to pass the ball necessarily. They got 2 good running backs.
Yeah. Hey, Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon are going to be good fantasy options this year, man, because they're going to run the shit out of it.
Well, I think they're going to go to that. So Matt LaFleur, he's from the Tennessee Titans coaching tree, obviously, and they like to run that ball a lot and go off play action. That's what I think they're going to do. I think Green Bay's defense is pretty good. Again, if we go back to it, I don't think Chicago is any good. I really don't. Like, I think people are just totally like they're a totally fad pick. I look at Minnesota like, yeah, they're good, but I only fear Minnesota strictly because of Jefferson and some of the players that they got in their offense. Do I fear anybody on their defense? Hell no. Right. So like that's the issue I have now.
No, if we don't win our division this year, we probably won't win it ever. Like it's a pretty it's might be one of the easiest cakewalks to the in the league.
I don't disagree at all. Like so let's look at the betting lines. Okay, so Super Bowl betting, I should have made these a little bit bigger, but I think it's interesting, Tyler, if you look at it, the over-under is 9.5 wins, right? But the over is minus money right now. So under is getting there's the bets are coming more in for the over than they are the under. Obviously, the Detroit Lions are the favorite to win the NFC North. I think it's plus 180. They're 4th in the NFC to win the NFC.
Yeah, plus 145 for us to win the North.
And then if you look at the bottom of the Super Bowl outright betting, there's a lot of AFC teams in there, and there's the Lions that are, I think it might be the 4th best team in the NFC. So that is interesting. But the player props I find really interesting. There's one that I really like the most. So it's Jahmyr Gibbs to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, and Brian Branch to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. Plus 21,000. You put $10 on it, you can win $2,100. I think that's kind of like if you want to put some money away, maybe that might be your shot. But I look at the AP Offensive Rookie of the Year. Jahmyr Gibbs is in 4th. And I look at Jared Goff, his over under for passing total, his total passing TDs is 24.5.
Yeah, hammer the shit out of that. Over.
Now I want to ask you think he's gonna go over?
Hell, easy. That might be the easiest bet on the whole damn page, dude. Jared Goff, he had 29 touchdowns last year, and we only added more weapons, and he's gonna have J-Mo for longer. And we have Laporta over Hawkinson, and we have a upgraded version of Swift and Jamal, guys that can actually catch the ball from the backfield. Yeah, I think you hammer the over all day. I see a minimum of 28 touchdowns from Jared Goff this year, and I would say his ceiling is probably 35, 36.
I think that's a really good, like if you could get, like if the odds can go lower and you can get it for maybe 115 minus 115, that would be a perfect bet because right now it's at 128, I believe.
136.
So the juice isn't that good, but it's just like I do think that he's gonna throw more touchdowns. I think because Jahmyr Gibbs is more reliable than a guy like DeAndre Swift. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is really going to be a great player for the Detroit Lions. And obviously, if you look over here with the Coach of the Year, Dan Campbell is favored to win AP Coach of the Year, which is crazy to think because at one point there was a lot of people who thought that he was going to be one of the guys who would be fired in year 2 after going 1-6. I remember we did that podcast after what was it, Miami?
Which one?
The one where it was like 1-6. You were kind of. I said.
Might have been. I think it was Dallas.
It might have been. We should go back on that podcast and pull it up. But I think, I had a feeling that they would kind of pull something together at the end. Obviously, when you look at the way that they pulled it together with 8-2 down the stretch, that was pretty remarkable. But 8-2 down the stretch, you did a really good job. it's interesting to hear, and yeah.
Yeah, I want to say, dude, it was like let me see, because we won, and then we lost. Yeah, it had been after the Cowboys or the Dolphins because we got our asses spanked. I mean, we barely lost to the Dolphins, so I don't think I would have overly reacted to that too much. But
I think people are more reactive to about the defense being as bad as it was playing, because I think that the Miami game we gave up a lot of points, if I'm not mistaken.
it was 31-27.
Yeah, I think that was another game where we didn't force a punt, so that was an issue. But
well, I mean, dude, just look at it. Like the way I see this is like I love. Sorry, I had to get a bug. I love how much I can trust Brad Holmes, because it's like I was looking at that team like, dude, I know we'll get better sometime at some point, like someday, somehow, but like how? Like who are we gonna possibly get to put guys in better positions? Like unless we go to the Bears route and we overspend a bunch of money on a bunch of guys we don't need, how the hell are we gonna get better on defense? We don't have the guys, we don't have the talent, we don't have the money.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I knew the team was gonna get better. I didn't think they would get as much better as they did. Going down the stretch with the 8-2, and then they had a top 20 defense going down the stretch. So that was very interesting. But I tie it back to James Houston, the emergence of James Houston, the John Kaminsky being healthy, and Aiden Hutchinson growing a little bit more. So I thought that was some pretty much some ways that Detroit got better down that stretch. Now, Tyler, I was talking with someone Tuesday. I was on the Detroit Lions news show, which was with Darcy, and we were talking about potentially, would you trade James Houston if the right package came along? And the only reason I brought it up was because, like, look, if you had a shot, if Indy called you tomorrow, right, and they said we're going to give you Michael Pittman for James Houston, are you pulling the trigger? It's not saying that you would pull the trigger. It's not saying that you would do something like that. It's saying, would you make that move if it came to it? Now, I know that there's a lot of people out there that are probably going, "What the hell are you talking about?" But like, if there was a chance that you can get better at a certain position, wouldn't you do it?
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody has a price. Like, and that's what I'll say. Like, dude, it's so funny because like I would have done the same thing years prior. Like I'm trying to be like, because we study the team so much and because we're trying to do all this stuff, I'm trying my best not to like homer out on every single player and every single pick. And that's what you got to realize that we cannot do, because like James Houston is good, right? He has potential to be good. But there are some people that legitimately think this guy is going to be like a 16 sack guy like every year. James Houston is fine for what he was. He's a 6th-round pick. He is a pass rush specialist. Like, he will play 40 snaps a game. Absolutely has potential for double-digit sacks, but also has potential to play like a 6th-round pick a lot of the time too. Like yes, he's good, but James Houston is not a top 5 rusher in the NFL or top 10 rusher in the NFL. Like, he's just not, and you got to be realistic with yourself. But, and like I said, everybody has a price. So if you come in and you say, hey, I can get you a legitimate number 2. If somebody said, I'll give you Michael Pittman for James Houston, holy shit, I am sending him faster than you can finish your fucking sentence. Like, no brainer.
The only reason I brought it up to Darcy and the crew, and some of them were not happy about it, which I don't care.
Okay, bro, you do that all day. You don't even you thank Jim Irsay for having too many drinks that night, and you walk away with your head held high.
Also that and Coke. But look, I don't say sorry for any opinion that I have, because the reality of the situation is, like, if you are Brad Holmes, like, you're looking to make this team the best that you can make it at the moment in time. If you're gonna make this team better, how are you going to make it better? How are you going to make the trades? What are you going to do to make this team better? And sometimes, if you follow sports at any junction, baseball, hockey, football, baseball, basketball, any of it, when sometimes you have to give something to get something, right? And if you told me right now that you could trade James Houston for Michael Pittman, and when Jameson Williams comes back, when Jameson Williams comes back, he's not forced into the lineup. He's not forced to be like, hey, J-Mo, we need you, okay? We need you. Because at that point in time when he comes back against Baltimore, you don't know what the injury situation is going to be, and you don't think, obviously, him coming off suspension, he's not going to be fresh off the hop. I mean, that'd be a total fallacy.
No,
It's not
absolutely. And you always got to realize that everybody on this team has a price, and Brad Holmes knows that too. Like, we don't have, like, outside of Amon-Ra, we don't have any guys that are like, I mean, there's a couple, right? When you're talking about like youth and potential and like guys that are just great in their position, there's some untouchables. I mean, there's not many players better than Amon-Ra at receiver. There's not many players better than Aiden Hutchinson and as a young player, like with the potential. There's not that many players that are nearly as good as Penei Sewell. So there are some staples, but outside of those main guys, if you can trade or package something up and get a guy that's like upper echelon, like you're gonna do it. There's a price for almost everybody. There's probably, I want to say, maybe 7 guys total on this team that are probably considered untouchable.
So name the 7, because the guys I'm gonna mention. Okay, so I don't think Taylor Decker is untouchable. I don't think.
No, I would say the guys that are untouchable are Frank Ragnow,
Okay,
Penei Sewell,
okay,
Jahmyr Gibbs, just because of his age.
Yeah, age.
Amon-Ra, Aiden Hutchinson, Kirby Joseph.
Okay.
And that other one, you could, or like
Jack Campbell,
J-Mo,
Jack Campbell,
Jack Campbell, Laporta. I mean, the young, like really versatile like guys that we like, Brian Branch. So there's probably like 10. Outside of that, like if you're gonna come and bring me and blow me away like on a package deal, like I'm gonna listen. People are like, oh well, what about Jared Goff? Is he untouchable? Like Jared Goff's great, but if somebody says, hey, I'll give you Josh Allen and you have to give me Jared Goff in a first, yeah.
Oh yeah, we're doing it all day. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, obviously that would never happen. I'm being funny. I'm being hypothetical. So don't grill me.
No, but you never know what could happen in the NFL.
But I'm just saying, like, if there's an opportunity for you to get better, and everybody has a price, and you can't be ignorant to think like, oh well, we can't trade James Houston. Yes, he's a great player we found in the 6th round, but let's not act like he is like Lawrence Taylor.
But the quarterback movement in this league has been really crazy, because when we talk about, if I would have told you 10 years ago that Russell Wilson would be on the Broncos, Aaron Rodgers would be on the Jets, Derek Carr would be at the Saints, and Deshaun Watson,
Matthew Stafford, baby.
Yeah, well, Deshaun Watson would be with the Browns, you'd have been like, dude, what are you smoking? Like, what are you on?
Right.
But like in the NFL, like we go through this period of motions where like 1 minute you're great, like 1 minute you think this team is like the creme de la creme, like in LA with the Chargers. Like, could there be a moment when they decide like they obviously gave Herbert his money, obviously, but is there going to be a moment in time where they just realize like, dude, we suck ass, we got to get rid of Justin Herbert, and then Justin Herbert's on the move? Like those are the things that could happen. So like when you look at Indianapolis and you look at Michael Pittman, I mean, would they make that move with the rookie quarterback? Potentially not. But if they think that they're getting someone in James Houston, you kind of have to think about it. I mean, it's obviously like, I always tell people like when the Red Wings traded for Alex DeBrincat, right? He was a 40-goal scorer. His plus minus isn't that great. You know, you're kind of getting what you're getting. You didn't really give up that much to get him, but that was that's kind of like an anomaly, you know, because he's a hometown kid. It's like if the Pistons were like, okay, we're gonna trade for James Harden tomorrow. Well, you're probably
or like Devin Booker, because he's from Grand Rapids.
Right. No, but I'm saying if he's not from this hometown.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna have to give something up to get something. And if they went to go trade for James Harden tomorrow, they're gonna probably have to give up Cade or Jaden or Jalen Duren. Like they're gonna have to give up someone of significance. So if you're gonna, it's not Madden, you know. You can't just trade a player and like trade a bunch of picks and think that you're gonna get, you know, whoever you want. That's not the way it works.
I just think that, like, listen, like Randy Moss got a 4th round pick from the Patriots.
Right.
You're trying to tell me that you think that James Houston is the Randy Moss of defensive ends?
No.
Hell no. And I'm not shitting on James Houston. I think he's a good player, and I think he can be great, especially for where we got him. He's a 6th round gem. He's a good role guy. But like, like I said, you have to be realistic in your value of players.
Yeah.
Like other teams and other places, they're not going to view these guys. No one's going to be like, "Oh, I'll give you a first round pick for James Houston." That's not going to happen. If we made him available, someone could offer a third or a fifth or a fourth, somewhere in the mid rounds. You're not going to get a first round pick for that guy. And to say, "Oh, James Houston for Michael Pittman," dude, the Colts would be stupid to do something like that because the value just doesn't match up.
Yeah, I just, it's something I thought about because obviously with, they have
But it's
29
hilarious that there were people that were like, "Oh, it's like
No, I mean,
run,
no, like
run as fast as you can."
I think outside the box sometimes, like I think like I don't think like regular people, like when I went to do those scouting classes, like you're always taught to like think outside the box, right? You're not taught to just think like in a box. You want to think outside the box. The best general managers in the NFL or NHL or Major League Baseball or NBA, they think outside the box. That's why they're good. Like Daryl Morey of the 76ers, he was a guy that was like heavy on analytics. You know what I'm saying? You
Or
get
you can
these
be a guy that thinks outside the box like Bob Quinn. You think you're the smartest guy in the room, and you fuck
well,
everything up.
no, but Bob Quinn thought he was smart, and he said he watched a lot of tape on Tease Tabor. I'm still waiting to see how much tape he watched, because if you'd have watched Florida, if you'd have watched Tease Tabor, you'd have been like, "There's no way in hell that this guy watched Tease Tabor in college." Because if you would have watched him in college, you'd have seen him got smoked by some for Vanderbilt wide receiver, and we all know that Vanderbilt isn't a school for athletes. We know that they're smart kids, but Jesus Pete, like if he's getting roasted by a kid from Vanderbilt, what do you think is going to happen when he gets to the NFL?
Yeah.
But anyways, so obviously we look at this team and we think about how good they could be. Like, what would
I'm grabbing
be
my charger really quick. Go ahead and carry this for a second.
right? Yeah, like we look at this team and how good they could potentially be. When you look at the Lions and you look at how they've transformed this roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball. When you get a guy like C.J. Garner-Johnson, you get a guy like Cameron Sutton, you get a guy like Emmanuel Mosley, you transform the defense in a heavy way. So when I look at this team, is there a chance where they could potentially like fall short of expectations? I'm sure that there's a chance that they could fall short of expectations, but where's this guy Tyler at? Now our staff has picked the division, picked the record, the rookie of the year, all that stuff. I think we all are in agreement that there is going to be a better. This is going to be a better team this year with the way that they're constructed and the players that they've added, and that's going to be interesting to see what they could do moving forward. But I want to bring you back to what we were talking about with the player props, though, because if you look at the player props, Jahmyr Gibbs to win Offensive Rookie of the Year and Brian Branch to win Defensive Rookie of the Year, it seems like a large kind of thing, but look, plus 2,100, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage when you do that. So, I mean, if you put $10 down, you could win $2,100. So that's not a bad deal at all. But when you look at Offensive Rookie of the Year, obviously Jahmyr Gibbs is fourth on that list. So that's pretty good to see. We were talking earlier about how this team has gotten better. Look, when you look at the player movement in free agency, they added Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, they added Brian Branch in the draft, they added Emmanuel Mosley in free agency, Cameron Sutton in free agency. They let go of Jeff Okudah, they let go of Mike Hughes, they let go of Deshaun Elliott and Amani Oruwariye. And they're a better team on the defensive side of the ball. Now, when Tyler gets back, we're going to talk about our picks because that's what's important. And I don't know where he is. Anyways, so this is the player movement, the guys that they added, the value that they added. They added They added Cameron Sutton, who got 3 interceptions, completion percentage of 47.9. They've added a lot of talent to this team. Look at the offense. You look at Jahmyr Gibbs. You look at Sam Laporta. You look at Dave Montgomery. They kind of transformed that backfield from a team that had, DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams. There was times last year when we were watching the games against these teams, and DeAndre Swift or Jamal Williams, whichever one you're thinking of, they made bad decisions with running the ball, and that was interesting to see that. But when you look at the Detroit Lions moving forward, we're gonna go back. I'm gonna go back to what. Who do you fear? I obviously fear the Green Bay Packers more than I fear the Bears and the Vikings. And Tyler and Mayank are on the same level. They're on the way that they think, and it's going to be interesting to see who is right on that portion. Now, when we look at this team with the Detroit Lions, it's funny because we talk about it all the time that this team could be really good moving forward. And when we look at the players that they've added, you look at the players that you added, it's a much better team than last year. And I think going into this year, there's a lot of excitement around the Detroit Lions. There's a lot of excitement around the offense, especially the way that they played last year. There's a lot of excitement around the defense because of the players that they've added, like I just said a million times. But when you look at this team, if you're looking at a position that could potentially be the downfall of this team, I would potentially go wide receiver. I would potentially go kicker. But in the meantime, I think this is a team that could really, really do some great things. So, um, look, Tyler, I don't know where he went, but these were the staff win totals. So I was 12-5. I had my offensive player of the year was Jahmyr Gibbs. My defensive player of the year was Gardner Johnson. My rookie of the year was Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think the surprise player of the year will be Levi Onwuzurike. Now, Tyler and Mayak, again, they're just in lockstep with each other. Tyler was 12-5. We had the same record, but he also has Jahmyr Gibbs as the offensive player of the year. He has defensive player of the year to Aiden Hutchinson, which also Mayank believes the same. They both believed in the rookie of the year is going to be Brian Branch. Surprise player of the year, Tyler went with Tracy Walker. Mayank went with Broderick Martin. And Mayank had the highest win total. Look at that, 13-4 for Mayank. He thinks that the Detroit Lions will go 13-4, which would be pretty damn good. But you look at this team, man, and I I can't tell you that I think Detroit is a better team than 12-5. Like I can't say that they're a 12. They're going to be a 13-win team because that's just ridiculous. But I do look at 9 wins last year. They are 3 games better. I think that you could add 3 games with maybe if you get this stop here on defense, you win the game. Maybe if you get this stop on you get this first down on offense, you win the game. And when you look at this team, they got better at those portions. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what this Detroit Lions team does. They got a lot of talent, and they're going to be pretty damn good. So it's going to be interesting. I'm seeing what Tyler's doing because um, I don't know, he just cut out for a minute. But all right, go back to the staff win totals. I got again. Mayank believes 13-4. I believe 12-5. Tyler believes 12-5. It's a good kind of situation to be in. But me and Tyler both are on Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm on Gardner Johnson. I think rookie of the year will go to Jahmyr Gibbs. But my surprise player of the year is Levi Onwuzurike, and I think that we all forgot about Levi Onwuzurike. We really did. We didn't think about Levi Onwuzurike as a player. We thought, maybe he can get himself together, maybe he can't. But I saw some glimpses of him in the preseason that made me really like the way that he played, and I think that with Lee McNeil getting more leaner in the offseason, I think this Detroit Lions team could really be, with Levi Onwuzurike coming back from injury, finally being healthy. I think he can live up to that second round pick that he was picked at. And I think that if you can add Levi Onwuzurike into the equation with Lee McNeil, and let's say they were drafted just as you thought they were going to be, and maybe Lee McNeil gained some little pass rush moves, you could really have a formidable total defensive line. And I think that's what Brad Holmes was imagining when they drafted Onwuzurike and Lee McNeil back to back. But we got Tyler back.
Phone died, man. I had it propped up here, and the charger itself wasn't plugged in, so I had to go grab the charger and ended up dying.
What a bum. What a bump. So I was telling people about your staff, our staff picks. Now Mayock, he has 13-4. St. Brown was his offense player of the year. Hutch was his defense player of the year. Branch was his rookie of the year. Broderick Martin was his surprise player of the year, which was pretty interesting. You were kind of on my side with the offensive player of the year. We went different defensive player of the year. Then you were on the Brian Branch train. I was on the Jameer Gibbs train as the rookie of the year. But I'm just interested to hear what makes you think your picks are like. What's the reasoning behind your picks?
Yeah. So, excuse me, probably similar to yours. I think offensive player of the year. Do I think Amon Ra is the best player on our offense? Absolutely. But I'm looking for somebody to unlock something special and to give us a full, like, Marshall Falk, like, 1,000 yard reception or 1,000 yard receiving, 1,000 yard rushing type of potential. And I think Jameer Gibbs is in a position to be very, very special. And I think he's going to give that spark that we need, that over the top, like, Alvin Kamara, Marshall Falk, Daniel Tomlinson type of like feel to him, where he's going to be dynamic in the pass game and dynamic in the rush game. So that's why I went with Jameer Gibbs. So as far as like, we might as well just run down all our picks.
Yeah.
Aiden Hutchinson, I think that he is just excuse me. He's a
Jesus
dog,
Christ,
man.
get some fucking water.
All right, I'm good. I'll just drink another sip of beer.
Get some water. Jesus, Pete. This guy's coughing
but,
like this guy's choking like Matt Patricia over here.
but Aiden Hutchinson, I feel like he is a dog. I feel like he's one of those blue chip guys we have on defense that has the ability to be a 13, 14, 15 sack per season guy, has a chance to become your staple end, your Nick Bosa, your Joey Bosa, your Montez Sweats, your just your elite guys on the edge. I think that he has an opportunity to be our blue chip D line or D end. As far as the what was the next one? The rookie of the year.
Yeah, rookie of the year. You had
I switched it up. I switched it up from Jameer, even though he's a rookie, to Brian Branch, and just because I could have someone else on my list. I think Brian Branch is he has that chip on his shoulder. He has a lot of potential to be like a hybrid, like corner, safety, nickel, your CJ Gardner Johnson type, and we're gonna have two of those on the field. That guy's nasty. He's mean. He can hit. He can cover. He can tackle. He was a projected top 20 pick. Some even had him in the top 15. We got him at an absolute steal at 48, I believe, 48 or 45.
Yeah.
And he's gonna go off. And then I got our surprise player of the year. I think Tracy Walker, man. I think he's gonna have a chip on his shoulder, being kind of the odd man out. He's gonna come in. He's gonna provide a lot of hype off the bench and a lot of a lot of big hits and a lot of just playing the right way. And I think because he's such a competitor and he's been used to being like cemented as the starting safety his whole career, that like this finally does give him a little bit of fire under his ass and kind of like gives him that chip on his shoulder. And I think he will surprise us. I'm gonna say, I could easily see like a 3 or 4 pick season coming from Tracy Walker with 60, 70 tackles, couple sacks, couple tackles for loss. Like I think he's gonna come out with some. I think he's gonna come out with some attitude and some flair, and he's gonna show us what he's made of. He had a year off, so I think that helped him mentally speed up. So I think he's going to be in a good place when he comes back.
Yeah, the one thing about Tracy Walker that I'm kind of interested to see how he plays. Certain people when they lose their job, because there's a chance that he could lose his job with the way that Kirby Joseph has played, and then the emergence of Brian Branch, which we haven't even talked about enough about Brian Branch. Like I think Brian Branch could be an elite player. Obviously, you do as well, but like you look at this team and you're like, man, this team could be really damn good.
And I mean, that's just kind of the whole thing is like, we were so young and inexperienced, but like we also had a ton of addition by subtraction last year, getting rid of our 4 worst players, 4 of our worst 5. So like, I think it's going to help us out a lot because not only did we add a lot of good young pieces, but we have a little bit more experience coming back with those second year guys. And like I said, we have a lot of guys that were just addition by subtraction, and we got some of those guys who just stunk up the damn building right out of there. So, every year we're going to see that though. Like that's something I like to talk about a lot on the podcast. And that's something I bring up a ton of times is that it's going to come to a point where every year you have to draft 6 players or 7 players. That is how an NFL draft works. Yeah. And I already love everybody on this team, but there's going to be a position where like you're continually drafting to like bump other guys out, whether they want too much money or they get hurt too often or they just stop producing or they just get old. I think we're gonna like truly start to see like next year, like we can really start drafting for luxury for the first time maybe ever. We're going to be like, okay, well, we don't have any super glaring needs, but hey, what could we do to save some money or to get better, or where could we grow, or where could we push some competition? And we're going to finally, see the team start to draft out of like luxury versus absolute need. And so, it's interesting. We have some of the guys coming up like Jonah Jackson, Taylor Decker, some of these guys that like could be future guys that we move off of at the positions. And so basically I'm rambling on my point that we added a ton of addition by subtraction this year, and that makes me very hopeful for like the start of like this is the first year of our like, okay, the rebuild's pretty much over, it's go time. Like I don't want to say our window's opening up because I think Brad Holmes is doing this long term for like to be good for a long time, but like we're kind of like in a position where like we've always said, right, year three is when the rebuild starts to be over for these guys, because we had a really good, like we were able to speed up our rebuild really well by Brad Holmes drafting so good. So like this is the start of something great.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. Like I think that with the way that they've played, the way they've drafted, they've actually put themselves in a better position moving forward. And I'm interested to hear your opinion on this, Tyler, because this is one of the things we'll hit on before we end the podcast. We'll obviously have our closing thoughts, especially with the season coming up. And our next podcast is going to be the preview. So that's what we're going to be doing. But I hear a lot of people talking about Jonah Jackson and how should they sign Jonah Jackson? Should they not sign Jonah Jackson? Should they sign Jonah Jackson? And like part of me believes like this is what I believe. So like you could pay Jonah Jackson all the money that you want to pay him. You want to pay him as a top guard, you're able to do it. My philosophy is like you're gonna have to spread that money around. Like if you look forward past Jonah Jackson, you look at maybe potentially a Kirby Joseph that's gonna need a contract extension. Amon Ra, that's going to need a contract extension. Aiden Hutchinson, Penei Sewell. Like you look at the players that are going to need contract extensions, and you're going, well, you're going to have to lose one of them. And I'm interested to hear if you have to lose one of them, it has to be Jonah Jackson, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it does. And if not, if you're very, very, very confident in Jonah Jackson, that means you have to kick Taylor Decker to the curb immediately. You cannot have that much money. We already have like the third most expensive offensive line in the league, and I think that there are some areas for improvement. Well, something that I see is that Jonah Jackson, it's like elite guards, like unless they're absolutely like career, like game changing, like franchise altering guys, like there's only a few guys I can ever think of from really at the guard position that are just like so unbelievably good you had to keep them. That's like Larry Allen, Zach Martin, Quentin Nelson.
Yep.
I mean, there are a couple of guys that are just absolute like staples. Do I think Jonah Jackson is at the level of Zach Martin or Quentin Nelson? No. Absolutely not. No way. I do think he's a top 10 guard. But again, like how impressive is it to have to be a top 10 guard? Like it sounds silly saying that, but like your bread and butter, you're looking at, you want a really great left tackle. You want a good center. And if you have a good right tackle, that's a pretty good luxury, which I think we have the best right tackle in the league. But like your guard positions, when you have your three staples, center, left tackle, right tackle, you can kind of get away with lacking a little bit in the guard department because you have a stud on your left and your right. Like it's not necessary. Like if somebody were to tell me, hey, we got to get rid of Jonah Jackson, but we can plug and play Graham Glasgow and we can go get Evan Brown again for a 2-year, $8 million deal, and those are your two starting guards, like, okay, that's cool. Let's run it.
Well, part of the reason that I asked this question is because if you watch Brian Baldinger on Twitter, which he has some great Baldy breakdowns, it's great, just absolutely phenomenal the way he breaks down the game. Because you love to hear a former player break down the game like Baldinger does. But he was talking about Kobe Sorsdahl and how he was just a menace against in the preseason game. And I know it's preseason, but offensive line, there really is no preseason for offensive linemen or defensive linemen. Like you either know what you're getting or you don't know what you're getting, because these guys they really can't take it easy with each other because on the other side there's a guy that's trying to make a roster, and then on the other side you're not trying to look like an idiot out there. And it was interesting because Brian Baldinger, he's a former offensive lineman, and he was talking about how he's doing so good with his pad level, the way that he's moving, and just to hear that, I kind of go, did Brad Holmes potentially find another guy to replace Jonah Jackson? I mean, obviously next year you're gonna have to you might have to replace both guards because are you gonna give Vaitai a contract? Probably not. Are you gonna give Glasgow a contract? Probably not. So you're gonna have to go into free agency in the draft and get a guard, and that's why I was kind of in on the guard thing. But with the way that the draft played out, Brian Branch came to you in the second round. Sam Laporta, obviously, you can't really. That's a good offensive weapon that's going to help this team move forward. And the way that the first round went with Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell, I think that the way that they drafted in the final two pieces in the second round, I thought it was a really good investment to get Kobe Sorsdal. Now, the one area that I'm kind of back and forth on is I believe that the Hendon Hooker pick still to me it doesn't make much sense. Now I think if you think that Hendon Hooker could be a potential starting quarterback, okay, maybe we do make sense. But with the kicking situation and how they were looking for kickers in the just recently with Will Lutz and maybe Brett Maher and everything, um, why would you use that third round pick on a guy like Hendon Hooker? You could have used it on Chad Ryland or maybe even Jake Moody. I mean, a lot of people would have bitched about how early you took a kicker, but if you think that that guy could be your future kicker, you take him. And that's one of the things I worry about with Brett Holmes because we haven't had a good kicker since he's been here. It's been kind of like a revolving door of misfits. So hopefully Riley Patterson can get it together because when you get to the playoffs, man, these games are so close. And obviously, being a Michigan State fan, I know all about bad kicking and bad field goal kicking because they were 50% from field goal range last year. And if you're 50% from field goal range, you're probably not going to win a lot of games because a lot of these games, I don't care if it's college football, high school football, or the NFL, when you get to these tough matchups, like when you are going against a division rival or you're going against the Kansas City Chiefs, those kickers, they earn their money. Ask Justin Tucker. Ask, the Chiefs have a really good kicker with Harrison Butker. So that's what I
Yeah,
look at.
and I think we'll find it. I think it'll take time, but we'll eventually find it. And I think Brad Holmes. I think that what confuses people sometimes is that he is such a value guy. And with that being said, like I think he valued Hendon Hooker pretty high, and I think I thought a lot of people valued him high, right?
Yeah,
So it was in a position where it's like, did he necessarily feel like at that time? And this is you got to remember, this is before Teddy Bridgewater. This is before
yeah,
we had no backup quarterbacks. He's sitting there thinking, okay, this is somebody that people were talking about maybe being a top 15 pick,
yeah,
maybe being a top 12 pick, especially before he got hurt. But
yeah,
even after, people were talking about him in the first round. People were talking about him at pick 20, pick 25, pick 30. I mean, even the announcers were like, hey, this is pick 20 with the Vikings. Do you think that they could go Hendon Hooker? So, like, I think Brett Holmes saw, oh my God, there's a guy that's valued in the top 20 and he's fallen all the way to 68. So like I think that sometimes the value gets the best of him. And I'm not
yeah.
sitting here trying to say, oh, I'm thinking better than Brad Holmes or I'm better than Brad Holmes. Look, he's in this
No,
position for a reason and he does great. But I think like it's fair to be able to criticize everybody and this is not necessarily a horrible thing, but I do think that like sometimes he lets the value of players get the best of him because he wants the best value. So he's
right.
sitting there thinking, hey, I got a guy that most people viewed in the top 20 and I can get him at almost 70. That's too good a value for me to pass up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draft him and I'm going to make him fit. He'll fit somewhere, somehow, some way, at some time. And I don't hate the philosophy, but like that's kind of like I think where his mindset is. Like if like even like Brian Branch, which Brian Branch fit this team perfectly, and we needed something like that. But
Yeah,
he's looking like panicking, like how the hell do I get Brian Branch because he's 30 spots below what I thought he was going to be, and I'm a value guy and I need to get the most value. That's where I think exactly happened with the Hendon Hooker pick. The
yeah.
guy seen a guy that was potentially 40 spots under value and he's like, I got to go for it because somehow, some way, at some point in time, this will pay off, and this is the guy I want.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying is true. I just look at it like it could have went a different way. Maybe
Yeah,
that
no, absolutely could have.
you know,
And that's one of the maybe one of the downfalls, if you could say, is that sometimes he lets the value of get to the best of him of like where it's at, but also his own value too, because like I thought he valued Broderick Martin like way too high. Like
yeah,
I did.
the Broderick Martin one I wasn't really mad at because I think
It was
Broderick
just weird.
Martin.
He traded 3 picks to get him. Like,
I think he really wanted Broderick Martin. I think who was it? Zach Pickens went off the board before Broderick Martin. I think that's who he really wanted. But when you look at the reality of the situation, like I think that he knew that he was going to have to make a move to get up there and see if you can make that happen, and that's what they did. But as long as we don't play football like Nebraska and Minnesota right now, I mean, it's 3-0 going into the second half. This is absolutely garbage football. But Tyler, I think we got to end the podcast. So, um, we're obviously gonna have our closing thoughts, but if there's one area of concern that you have for this team, what is it? If there's one area that you believe wholeheartedly is going to help this team get to the expectations that they have, what is it?
yeah, and I think it's carried the last couple podcasts of something I've continually said is that lack of depth, like of talented depth in the wide receiver room. I think we're an insanely deep wide receiver room. I really do. But like I said earlier, I think we have an entire room full of wide receiver threes and fours, which I would love our wide receiver room to look like Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds, and Marvin Jones if they were our third, fourth, and fourth, fifth, and sixth guys. Like I still think we need a guy that can be like a true number two, or can be like a really like top end
1A,
wide
1B.
receiver three, fringe wide receiver
Yeah.
two range, because like the appeal of having DJ Chark last year was awesome. I was excited about that because it seemed like a true like X receiver, a guy that can come in and like kind of get your 50-50 balls, kind of be your DJ Chark, your Adam Thielen, your your T Higgins, your true number two guy. And I still think that we need a guy like that because I think the trio, it's like this, right? Man, we have an awesome receiver core with the trio of Amon-Ra, J-Mo,
Right.
and we're
Right.
missing that. We're missing
Well,
that final guy.
What's your hope? I think what Brad Holmes is hoping on is that Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta become a part of the wide receiver core. That they're not going to primarily base it on just the wide receiver core.
Sure.
Obviously, you're going to use Jahmyr Gibbs as a wide receiver in the passing catching situations. You're going to use Sam Laporta, Brock Wright, and James Mitchell in passing situations. So, look, I think we're both on the same key with the wide receiver depth. If the wide receiver depth gets better, I feel better. But when we get into week 8, week 9, obviously we're gonna get JMO back up after right at the Baltimore game. If they can stave off injuries, that could really be huge because getting JMO back, we're hoping that he hits the ground running. But I believe that he's gonna kind of take his time getting back because you're not just going to hit the ground running unless you're training, and we don't even know if he's going to be able to get treatment on his stuff until. I mean, Dan Campbell said no right up until I think it was this week, so that'll be interesting to find out. But
Yeah, and that's so the bullshit because they won't even allow them to get treatment from the team's like doctors and facilities while they're out. That's total bullshit. They're a part of this team. They should be protected by the NFLPA, and they
yeah,
should have their benefits, and they should be able to be treated because you know what? They're gonna come back for this. And dude, let's not forget. Yes, they play a sport for a living, but they're humans and they're people. So if they have an opportunity to let a trained and paid professional, and people can say, oh well, it's just a hamstring or this and that. If you've ever pulled your hamstring or ever hurt your damn leg, dude, that shit hurts. Like, and if your team has access to a ton of doctors and a ton of money and a ton of resources, then you should be able to utilize them. I mean, that would be like saying that, you go to work every day, but you can't eat at the cafeteria, or you can't use the vending
yeah,
machines.
it's just the rules that the NFL has. I mean,
I know that's what I'm saying.
it's
The
the way
NFL's trash for that, bro. It's
it's the way it
bullshit.
is. But I think that they should kind of amend the rules because this is something that you haven't really dealt with. I think they're putting themselves behind the line, but I think this is how it's going to happen. It always happens with Detroit.
And other people can say, hey, he's got enough money, he can hire his own people. Yes, and I
Yeah,
hope
no, no,
he
no,
is.
no, no, no. You can't say that. People that say that are stupid, because you're getting treatment from the team, because if he goes against the team rules, or he goes against the team's wishes, medical wishes, like I remember when Jack Eichel went against the Buffalo Sabres medical team wishes. They wanted to trade his ass right then and there because he wasn't going with their line of thinking. Now, you're obviously entitled to your second opinion, but if they just give him, if they allow him to have, the they allow him to get treatment, I think that's something they have to do. Obviously, we've never experienced anything with this gambling situation, how prevalent it's going to be. I think there's going to be more suspensions down the line. But if it's an injury situation, like, obviously they don't want guys coming back in the facility too early. So I get that point of view. But along the line, there's going to have to be some rules amended down the line. Now, Joseph Murdoch said, he said staying healthy in the sky is the limit. I agree with him. If they stay healthy, the sky is the limit. The issue is you don't really stay healthy throughout a whole entire NFL season. So that's number one. Now, obviously we were talking about, we kind of got off track a little bit, but if there's one area of this team that you believe that's going to put this team over the top, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, if I think that there's something that can really put us over the top, it's going to be good secondary play. So it's going to be good play from our corners, because we haven't had good cornerback play since there was a man here that used to wear number 23, and Mr. Slade Jr.
Well, Jerry Jacobs is wearing 23 now.
Yeah, I've seen that. So, like, in order for us to go over the top, we actually have to have some guys in our secondary that can actually guard somebody for longer than like 1.5 seconds. So I think personally that's just a strong secondary play is going to be enough to really take this team over the top into the double-digit 10, 11, 12 wins territory.
I agree, but I'm going to go in a different category. I'm going to go in a different realm of the possibility. I think when you have Kirby Joseph and you have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, I think potentially what you're setting up is you're going to be a ball hawking defense, and any balls that are thrown half-ass, especially because, let's be honest, you're going to be playing Lamar Jackson, who he likes to throw those balls. You're going to be playing Derek Carr, Bryce Young, who is a rookie. There's a lot of quarterbacks on that schedule that you go, do I really fear them? No. Like Geno Smith, these are your first like 4 games that you're gonna play. Obviously, you play Patrick Mahomes. We all know that Patrick Mahomes this guy's a magician. He can do whatever the hell he wants. He could literally poop out the ball and he's gonna get it to a receiver. But after that, you got Geno Smith, you got Desmond Ridder, you got Jordan Love, you got Bryce Young. There's not a quarterback that you really fear, and I think this defensive backfield, I think they're gonna sense fear from the quarterbacks, because they are guys that like to jump the routes. They are guys that if you make the wrong decision at the wrong time, they will make you pay. And I like what this defense is gonna be, because when Aaron Glenn started here, I think he wanted this kind of defense where they were allowed to attack, be aggressive. He just didn't have the talent to be aggressive. So that's what I think that I like about this team, especially this defense, the way that they have structured themselves. Now we're gonna get to.
So you think it's more? So you think it's more based on like how the safeties are going to play, or is your angle like our aggressiveness level is going to be what's going to be able to take us over the top?
Well, I think because
confidence and aggressiveness.
No, I think I think you hit it right with the second point. Okay, I think with the confidence of, like, okay, they're gonna have confidence that Cameron Sutton's gonna be good enough to cover his man, right? One of the things that happens when you're in any sport, okay, when you're playing with bad players, right? Sometimes you compensate your game to help others, right? But when you know that the guy that's on your left, like if you're a defenseman in hockey, if you know the guy on the left is not good, you're gonna try to cover for his ass. But if you're playing with,
I feel like that was Anzalone most of the year last year.
Yeah, but I feel like if you're playing with a guy who can help you, you're not saying, okay, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm gonna hope that you do the right thing. With Emmanuel Mosley potentially coming back in week 2, because he's gonna have 10 days off before then. And with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Kirby Joseph, you have 4 potential starting safeties in that safeties, okay, and then you have Jerry Jacobs in the cornerback slot. Like there's so much potential that they could use these guys on the field for. So that's why I really don't worry about this defense with the way that they're structured because, like I said last year, if Kirby Joseph jumped the wrong route and Will Harris is getting burned by Stephon Diggs up the seam, well, guess what? That's gonna be 7 the other way. So
Yeah, man. No, I agree. I think it's going to be like there's going to be a lot that lies on the defense this year, and
yeah.
I think we're going to see some stuff that we aren't used to seeing, and that's aggressiveness, athleticism, a lot of stunts, a lot of blitzes, a lot of creativity, and we're going to see if Aaron Glenn's for real.
All right, so we're gonna get to our closing thoughts. Tyler, you get to your first closing thought, then I'll go.
Yeah. So, um, one thing I want to like kind of bring up, and this is kind of one of my closing thoughts that I want to bring up, is that look for growth in our coaching staff and look for a little bit of a passing the torch this year. I want you guys to stop and realize this probably will be our last year having Ben Johnson. He potentially, it depends on which openings open up, but he was offered, from what I'm hearing, he was offered 2 different head coaching spots, or at least offered to be like in the final runnings, the finalists for at least 2 different NFL teams, and that was the Panthers and the Colts. I think that you're going to see a true system being put in place after this being the 3rd year. You're going to see positions that are plug and play. You're going to see things that work like a well-oiled machine, and you're going to see the passing of torch between certain coaches and certain people in the organization. And you're going to be in a position where we can truly see how this can be sustainable long term. And that is really, really important because, again, we don't want to fall apart when Ben Johnson leaves, which he inevitably will because he is a good coach. You don't want to fall apart when, if Aaron Glenn runs a really good defense and he gets a head coaching gig somewhere, we don't want our defense to start falling apart. You don't want these things to happen because these guys move on, because that's part of the league. Is when you're a good team and when you're in a good position, you're going to send out people that like go to bigger and better things and they get promotions and they move on and they get better. But you want to turn to the place that breeds that. You want to look up one day and be like, that guy was part of the Dan Campbell coaching tree. I'm just taking a little bit more of a kind of a sentimental route this time of really stopping and enjoying that, because we're going to truly see within these next few years, as we get to be a good team and if we can keep it sustaining, that there are going to be a carousel of different positions and different coaching members that will eventually have to be replaced. And you hope that there's enough systems set in place that, you can always keep the wheel turning. Like, you want to continually have a good offensive line. We'll continually have a good running back room. We'll continually have good, good offensive play calling, whatever it may be. So just watch for those subtle things and watch how everybody works together and gel, and who they plug and play to keep the well-oiled machines going. And I think that being able to see that happen in live time and actually see us going from a bad team to a good team and like sustaining that is going to be really exciting for Lions fans, because this is not SOL, man. That's bullshit. Anybody that says that is not truly feel the culture shift and truly feel the change. And I am so freaking excited, man, and I'm pumped up. And I think this is going to be a run. We're set up for a run as a Detroit fan, like a Detroit Lions fan, I should say,
Yeah.
that like we've never seen before, because we were never prepared for it. Like, we finally have the right people in place, and I'm just so freaking pumped, dude.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really good that I kind of want to hit on a little bit before I get into my closing thought. But you said something about, you want to keep this sustainable, and I think that's what they're doing, because when you look at the way that, so when they fired Anthony Lynn, right?
Oh God.
When they fired Anthony Lynn, Dan Campbell took over play calling. And if you look at the play calling right now compared to when Dan Campbell took over, there's a little slight variation, but the reality of the situation is they like to pound the rock, they like to go off play action, they like to do that. Okay, I think that no matter if Ben Johnson leaves next year, which he probably will because he's a good coach, I still feel like this is Dan Campbell's offense. And I feel like with him being with Sean Payton all those years in New Orleans, I feel like he's more suitable to find replacements and to kind of have his own coaching style. You know what I'm saying? I feel like a lot of coaches, especially like you look at some of these coaches, man, when they lose one of their coordinators, it's like the death stare. Like, they're done. Like, they have no shot. With Dan Campbell, I think that obviously Ben Johnson is going to be a guy that's going to help him out. He's going to get a job eventually, but I think that this is still Dan Campbell's offense. And I look at Aaron Glenn. If they had to replace Aaron Glenn, I think that I think you have a future head coach right on your coaching staff with Kelvin Shepard. And I really do think that because the way that he coached up those linebackers last year with Malcolm Rodriguez and as he would call him Rodrigo, I think that was a pretty remarkable coaching job by Kelvin Shepard, because it's very, very hard to get rookies prepared to play in the NFL in year one against the teams that you played coming out of the pike. Like there was no Arizona Cardinals, okay? There was no easy team that you came out
The
against.
Philadelphia freaking Eagles, man.
You came out against Philadelphia, and you came out against Seattle, and you came out against Minnesota, New England. Like it's just not a good recipe for disaster, and that's exactly what happened. 1-6 to start. But going to my closing thought, I'm it's funny because we kind of had the similar closing thought, but I think that us as Lions fans, I don't think we realize how well this organization would kind of go into. Now, when we did this podcast last year, I think last year we're on episode 58, so we've only done 58 episodes. We're a relatively new Detroit Lions podcast. But last year when we did some of the episodes, like we were like, I could see next year being kind of like a turning the corner type year. But like if you look at the way that this team is set to go this year, um, I just it's remarkable where they were last year at this time to this time this year, and the talent that they've got that's gotten so much better. Like last year when we came into week 1 against the Eagles, right? We weren't talking about a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. We weren't talking about a Kirby Joseph. We were talking about a rookie Aiden Hutchinson. We didn't know who James Houston was. We knew who he was, a rookie that was on the practice squad, but we didn't know exactly who he was. There was no Charles Harris. So there was no Romeo Aquara. Josh Pascal was on the pup list. Like you went into that year thinking, man, it's gonna be rough. But they turned the corner a little bit with the way that they fought. They started 1-6. They ended 8-2. Now the talent is better on this team, and you go to Kansas City, and there's a definite shot that they can win that game. We'll talk about that more on next week's podcast. But if Chris Jones doesn't play for the Kansas City Chiefs, I think that they got they got every right in the world to think that they're going to be competing with Kansas City and potentially winning, because I don't know if you know this, Tyler, but do you know who their starting defensive tackle is if Chris Jones don't play?
Nick Williams, maybe.
Ha! That was a good guess. That was a good guess. No, Danny Shelton. We all know who Danny Shelton is because he was one of Patricia's. He was one of Patricia's first signings for his defense. The defense that absolutely were horrible. But I just remember that game against Kansas City where it was at Ford Field and they returned a 99-yard touchdown. So I think we need to get some payback there. But we're gonna have a lot of pre-game stuff next week. I think we're gonna do the podcast Tuesday, maybe.
Yeah, cool.
Because Wednesday's kind of the day before the game. Maybe we might do Wednesday, just a little refresher. Maybe Wednesday, but Thursday is the game, so we're not going to Sunday. We're not going to Sunday. We're going to Thursday. We are literally we're a week away from this game now. So
yeah, man, no, it'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it, dude. I mean, we got everything coming back. I mean, next week we got bold predictions, we got record predictions, we got score predictions, we've got stat predictions.
Well, we already had our record predictions, man.
I mean, I mean, as the weeks go on, we've got predictions about stats and how the games are going to go, and our bold predictions, man. Because hey, I think this year, me and Joe kind of talked about we wanted to kind of do something where we kind of keep score between me, him, and Mayunk. And we see who wins, and maybe we'll I don't know, we'll do a little something for it, man. And whoever the winner is at the end of the year, maybe they get a little something sweet. Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll have a guest picker too. So we'll see you guys on the next episode of the Detroit Lions News podcast. This was an hour-and-a-half podcast. We let this one roll because this is the ultimate Lions season preview. We got through a lot, including technical difficulties to start, which kind of sucked. But we will see you in the next podcast. We'll be going live on Facebook and YouTube again because there's a lot of people that like that. And if you're new to the podcast, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on Odyssey, which is the 97 The Ticket app, whatever. So you can go find us there. You can go find us on Amazon Podcasts or wherever the hell you get your podcasts. We're on like 80 different podcast websites. So we've done a pretty damn good job. And Tyler, I'm looking forward to us hitting 100,000 downloads with 58 episodes. That's pretty incredible.
Let's go, baby.
We will see you guys in the next podcast as we talk about the Detroit Lions versus the Kansas City Chiefs, Week 1 in Arrowhead. There's nowhere else you would rather be, and we will see you guys next week.